The old pickup truck rattled down the dirt road, kicking up dust behind it. Inside, a woman gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She was 34 years old, and everything she owned was packed in the back of that truck. Tools, camping gear, a few boxes of clothes, and a stack of library books about building cabins. She pulled up to a clearing in the forest and turned off the engine. The silence hit her immediately. No traffic noise. No neighbors arguing through thin walls. No husband telling her she was making a mistake. Just birds singing and wind moving through the pine trees. 5 acres. This was hers now. She'd spent every penny from the divorce settlement on this land. Her family thought she'd lost her mind. Her sister had actually laughed when she announced her plan. "You build a cabin? You've never even changed a tire by yourself." Maybe that was true. She'd spent the last decade in office cubicles, answering emails and attending meetings that could have been emails. She'd been married to a man who made all the decisions, who slowly made her feel smaller and smaller until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. But that was over now. She stepped out of the truck and took a deep breath. The mountain air felt different here, cleaner, like it could wash away the last 10 years if she breathed deeply enough. By evening, she had her tent set up and a small campfire going. She sat on a folding chair, eating beans straight from the can and looking at her land. Tomorrow, she'd start clearing the area where the cabin would go. She didn't really know what she was doing, but she had library books. She had YouTube videos downloaded on her phone. She had time, and she had something she'd never had before, a reason to prove everyone wrong. What she didn't know was that someone was already watching her. About half a mile down the road, past a thick line of trees, stood another house, a nice one, built 20 years ago by a man and his wife who'd dreamed of raising their family in the mountains. That man was sitting on his porch now, coffee cup in hand, watching smoke rise from the clearing where someone had just moved in. He was 42, with gray creeping into his hair faster than he'd expected, a veterinarian who made house calls to farms across the valley, a father of 2, and a widower who'd spent the last 3 years just trying to get through each day. His daughter came out onto the porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She was 10 with her mother's dark hair and curious eyes. "Dad, is someone moving into the empty land?" "Looks like it," he said, taking a sip of coffee that had gone cold. "Can we go say hi?" "Maybe in a few days. Let them settle in first." His daughter nodded and went back inside. He stayed on the porch a bit longer, looking at that smoke rising in the distance. In a small valley where everyone knew everyone, a newcomer was big news, especially one who'd bought that difficult piece of land that had been for sale for years. He wondered how long they'd last. Most people who moved out here with romantic ideas about mountain living were gone within 6 months. The winters were harsh. The isolation was real, and building anything on that sloped, rocky land would be a nightmare. He finished his cold coffee and went inside. He had animals to check on tomorrow, children to feed, a life that ran on routine and staying busy enough not to think too much. The next morning, the woman woke up at dawn. Her back ached from sleeping on the ground, even with a camping mat. She made instant coffee over her camping stove and ate a granola bar while watching the sun come up over the mountains. Then she got to work. She started by marking out where the cabin would sit. She'd studied the land carefully, choosing a spot that was relatively flat and had good drainage. Using stakes and string, she outlined a rectangle, 20 feet by 24 feet. Small, but enough for one person. Enough for a fresh start. By noon, she was covered in dirt and sweat. She'd cleared brush and small rocks, creating a rough work area. Her hands were already developing blisters. She wrapped them in duct tape and kept going. She didn't notice the man who drove slowly past on the road, glancing over at her progress. He had a call at a farm 5 miles away, a horse with a possible infection, but he found himself taking the long way home just to see if that truck was still there. It was. Over the next week, the woman fell into a rhythm. Up at dawn, work until dark, fall asleep exhausted in her tent. She started digging for the foundation, which was brutal work. The ground was rockier than she'd expected. Several times she hit large stones that took hours to dig around and remove. The locals started talking about her. At the general store in town, the cashier mentioned the woman living in a tent on the old Peterson property. At the diner, ranchers discussed whether she'd make it through her first winter. Most bet she wouldn't. The veterinarian heard these conversations. He didn't participate, but he listened. He learned she was alone. He learned she was planning to build a cabin herself. He learned that people thought she was crazy. One evening, his 7-year-old son asked, "Dad, why is that lady building a house all by herself?" He'd been wondering the same thing. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe she wants to. Can we help her?" She didn't ask for help. But it's hard to build a house alone. Even ants work together. His daughter joined in. "We helped Mr. Peterson fix his barn last year, remember? You said that's what neighbors do." He did remember. But that was different somehow. Or maybe it wasn't, and he just wasn't ready to meet new people, to let anyone new into their small, careful world. That night, lying in bed, he thought about his wife. She would have already baked cookies and introduced herself. She would have probably been over there helping, making friends instantly like she always did. She'd been good at that, at opening their life to people. Since she died, he'd done the opposite. He'd closed everything down, kept the world small and manageable, but his kids were right. The woman was their neighbor now, and watching someone struggle from a distance wasn't really his style, even if he'd gotten comfortable with keeping his distance from everyone. The next morning, the woman woke up to find 3 deer grazing near her tent. She stayed very still, watching them in the early light. They eventually wandered off, and she smiled. This was why she'd come here. These moments. This quiet. She got back to work on the foundation. She'd watched 20 videos about laying a proper foundation for a cabin. She knew it had to be level and solid, or everything else would be crooked. Measure twice, cut once. Do it right, even if it takes longer. Around mid-morning, she heard a vehicle coming down the road. It slowed, then stopped. She looked up to see a truck pulled over and a man getting out. Here we go, she thought. First curious neighbor. He walked toward her worksite, respectful enough to stop at the edge of her property. "Morning," he called out. "Morning," she replied, straightening up and wiping sweat from her forehead. "I'm your neighbor, about half a mile that way. Just wanted to introduce myself." She walked over, trying not to limp. Her legs were sore from all the digging. "Nice to meet you." "I'm the crazy woman building a cabin, apparently." He smiled slightly. "Word travels in a small town." "I'm getting that impression." There was a pause. He looked at her worksite, at the foundation taking shape. "That's good work," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "Ground's tough here." "Yeah, I've noticed." Another pause. Then he said, "If you need anything, we're just down the road. I'm a vet, so I keep odd hours, but my kids are usually around." "Thanks," she said. "I appreciate it." He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "Storm's coming in tomorrow night." "Big one. You'll want to secure everything. Wind gets brutal in this valley." She felt a flash of anxiety. Her tent, her tools, everything she owned was sitting out here. "Thanks for the warning." He drove away, and she stood there thinking. Her first real conversation with a neighbor, and all she felt was more aware of how unprepared she was. A storm? Of course, nothing could be simple, but she wasn't leaving. She'd made her choice. She'd prove she could do this, storm or no storm. What she didn't know was that the man was already worrying about her, wondering if a tent would hold up in the kind of wind this valley produced, and wondering why he cared about someone he'd just met. His daughter asked that evening, "Did you meet the new neighbor?" "I did." "What's she like?" He thought about that. "Determined," he finally said. Really determined. And somewhere deep inside, in a place he'd kept locked up tight for 3 years, something stirred. Not attraction, not yet. Just recognition. The recognition of someone else who was fighting their own battle, trying to build something new from nothing. He pushed the feeling away and focused on making dinner for his kids. But that night he found himself checking the weather forecast twice, looking at the storm warnings and wondering if she knew just how bad mountain storms could be. The storm hit exactly when the neighbor said it would. The woman had spent the entire day preparing, weighing down everything she could and moving her important tools into the truck. But nothing really prepared her for the sound of wind screaming through the valley at midnight. Her tent shook violently. Rain hammered down so hard it sounded like drumming. She lay in her sleeping bag, gripping a flashlight, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The tent poles bent in ways they weren't meant to bend. Water started seeping through the bottom despite the tarp she'd laid down. Then she heard something worse. A ripping sound. One of the tent stakes had pulled free. She scrambled out into the storm, getting instantly soaked. The rain was freezing cold. Wind nearly knocked her over. She tried to hammer the stake back in, but the ground was too soft now, too muddy. Another corner started to lift. Headlights cut through the darkness. A truck pulled up and she saw her neighbor jump out, already wearing a rain jacket. He didn't say anything, just grabbed a heavy tarp from his truck bed and helped her secure the tent. They worked in the pouring rain, barely able to see, shouting to be heard over the wind. They used rocks to weight down the tarp, creating a second layer over her tent. It wasn't pretty, but it held. They were both breathing hard, soaked to the bone when they finally finished. "You should come to my house," he shouted over the storm. "Wait this out somewhere dry." Her pride wanted to refuse, but water was literally pooling around her feet, and she was shaking from cold. "Okay," she shouted back. "Thank you." She grabbed her important documents and followed his truck down the road. His house was warm and dry and felt like a miracle. He handed her a towel and his daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad? What's happening?" "Our neighbor's tent was flooding. She's going to stay in the guest room tonight." The girl nodded, accepted this immediately, and went back to bed. Kids were like that sometimes, just rolling with whatever came. The woman stood in the entryway, dripping water on the floor, feeling embarrassed and grateful in equal measure. "I'm sorry for the intrusion." "Don't be. That storm would have destroyed your tent. Coffee?" She nodded. They sat in his kitchen while the storm raged outside. He made coffee and put out some cookies that were clearly store-bought. They didn't talk much at first, just listened to the wind. "How long have you lived here?" she finally asked. 20 years. "Built this house with my wife," past tense. She noticed but didn't ask. "It's a good house. She designed it. I just did what I was told." He smiled slightly, lost in memory for a moment. "You're really building that cabin alone?" "That's the plan. Can I ask why?" She wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug. "I spent 10 years of my life letting someone else make decisions for me. Where we lived, what I did, who I was allowed to be. Then one day I woke up and didn't recognize myself anymore. So I left. And I decided the next thing I build, I'm building it myself. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard." He was quiet for a moment. "That takes courage. Or stupidity. Haven't figured out which yet." He laughed, and she realized it was probably the first real laugh she'd heard from him. Maybe both. The best things usually take both. They talked until the coffee was gone. She learned he was a veterinarian, that he had 2 kids, that he'd lived in this valley his whole life. He learned she'd worked in marketing for a company that sold things nobody needed, that she'd always wanted to do something with her hands but never had the chance, that she'd saved every episode of a cabin building show and watched them all twice before buying her land. When she finally went to the guest room, she lay in an actual bed with actual sheets and felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the kindness of a stranger who'd driven through a storm because he was worried about her. The next morning, the storm had passed. Everything was soaked and muddy, but still standing. She went back to her property with the neighbor, both of them surveying the damage. It wasn't as bad as she'd feared. The foundation work was fine, the truck was fine, most of her tools had stayed dry. "You got lucky," he said. "I had help," she corrected. "Thank you, really." "That's what neighbors do," he paused. "Listen, I know you want to do this yourself, and I respect that. But if you ever need advice or someone to hold the other end of something heavy or just a second opinion, I'm down the road." She nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." But she was still determined to do it alone. This was her project, her proof to herself. Accepting too much help would feel like cheating somehow. Over the next few weeks, she made real progress. The foundation was complete and level. She started building the floor frame, consulting her books and videos constantly. Every night her muscles ached. Her hands developed calluses on top of blisters. She lost weight because she was too tired to cook proper meals and just ate sandwiches and canned soup. But the cabin was taking shape. Slowly, painfully. But it was happening. The neighbor drove past sometimes. He'd wave and she'd wave back, and they'd leave it at that. She appreciated that he wasn't hovering or offering unsolicited advice. He'd given her space to do her thing. His kids were more curious. A few times she looked up to find them at the edge of her property watching her work. The girl seemed fascinated by the whole process. The boy once shouted, "You're really strong," which made her laugh. One Saturday she was trying to lift a heavy beam into place. It was a 2-person job, really, but she was determined. She'd rigged up a system of ropes and pulleys, trying to do it herself. She'd gotten it halfway up when the rope slipped and the beam came crashing down. She jumped back just in time. The beam missed her by inches and hit the ground with a thunderous crash. Her heart was pounding. That could have seriously hurt her. Broken bones or worse. And she was out here alone, half a mile from the nearest person. She sat down hard on the ground, shaking. This was the reality check she'd been avoiding. Some things actually couldn't be done alone, no matter how stubborn you were. "Hey, are you okay?" She looked up to see the neighbor jogging over, concern on his face. He must have heard the crash. "I'm fine." The beam slipped. He looked at the beam, then at her jerry-rigged pulley system. "That's not going to work for the big ones. The physics aren't right." "I know that now," she said, frustrated with herself. He sat down next to her on the ground. "You know, asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. This is supposed to be my thing. My project. It still is. But even the most independent people need help sometimes. That's not failure. That's being human." She looked at him. Really looked at him. He had kind eyes, tired eyes. Eyes that had seen loss, she could tell. "Why are you being so nice to me?" He thought about that. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because I recognize someone who's trying to rebuild their life. Maybe because my wife would have already adopted you as a project." He smiled sadly. "She died 3 years ago. And I've spent those 3 years just going through the motions. But watching you out here, fighting to build something new, it reminds me that life doesn't have to be just going through motions." They sat in silence for a moment. Two people, both trying to figure out how to move forward from things that had broken them. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said quietly. "Thanks. And I'm sorry about whatever brought you here. Divorce. Much less tragic, but it felt like death in its own way." He nodded. "Endings are endings. They all hurt." "Yeah." He stood up and offered her a hand. "Come on, let's get this beam up properly. I'll help you today, and I'll show you a better pulley system you can use for the others. Deal?" She hesitated, then took his hand. "Deal." They worked together that afternoon. He was patient, explaining the physics of leverage and showing her how to build a better system. His kids came over too, curious and eager to help with small tasks. The girl carefully organized nails by size. The boy held the level and took his job very seriously. For the first time since she'd arrived, the woman felt something other than exhaustion. She felt connected, like maybe she wasn't completely alone out here after all. When they finished for the day, the beam was in place. "Perfect and solid. Same time next week?" the girl asked hopefully. The woman looked at the neighbor, who shrugged. "Only if you want help. Your call." She thought about her pride, about her plan to do everything alone. Then she thought about that beam almost crushing her, about how good it felt to have people around, to hear laughter while working instead of just her own breathing and the sound of tools. "Next week sounds good," she said, "but I'm making lunch." "Fair trade," the girl grinned. The boy cheered. And the neighbor smiled, really smiled for the first time since she'd met him. As they drove away, she stood looking at her cabin. The foundation was done. The floor was framed. Walls would come next. It wasn't how she'd planned it. She'd meant to do everything alone to prove she didn't need anyone. But maybe the real lesson wasn't about not needing people. Maybe it was about being strong enough to accept help, about knowing the difference between independence and isolation. She made dinner that night over her camping stove, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel lonely. She felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she needed to do. And down the road, the neighbor put his kids to bed and sat on his porch with a beer. His daughter had talked nonstop through dinner about the cabin. Autumn came to the valley like a paintbrush dipped in golden red. The woman had been working on her cabin for 3 months now, and the change was visible. Walls were going up frame by frame. It looked less like a construction site and more like an actual building. She'd settled into a routine. Weekdays she worked alone, taking her time with each piece. Weekends, her neighbor and his kids came over. It had become something they all looked forward to. The arrangement worked because she was still doing most of the work herself. They were just there for the parts that really needed extra hands, or when she needed advice from someone with more experience. The neighbor drove past her property more often than he probably needed to. Sometimes he was heading to a farm call. Sometimes he was just checking. He'd started noticing small details, like how she always took a coffee break at 10 in the morning, sitting on a stump and looking at the mountains. Or how she talked to herself while working, narrating what she was doing like she was teaching an invisible class. His morning routine had changed. He'd wake up, make coffee, and stand on his porch looking toward her property. Just checking that her truck was there, that smoke rose from her camping stove. Making sure she was okay, his daughter noticed. Kids always notice. Dad, why do you always look at the cabin lady's place? I'm just being a good neighbor, making sure she's all right. You didn't check on Mr. Peterson this much when he lived there. Mr. Peterson wasn't building a cabin alone. So you like her? He felt his neck get warm. I'm just being helpful. His daughter gave him a look that was way too knowing for a 10-year-old. Mom would have liked her. That hit him in the chest. Yeah, he said quietly. She would have. The truth was more complicated than he wanted to admit. Yes, he looked forward to the weekends when they went to help. Yes, he found himself thinking about the cabin lady during his farm calls, but it wasn't romantic interest. Not exactly. It was more like he was watching someone do something brave, and it was waking up parts of himself he'd thought were dead. His wife had been the brave one in their relationship, the adventurous one. She'd convinced him to build their house in the mountains when he'd wanted to stay closer to town. She'd started a garden that now grew wild without her care. She'd filled their home with life and laughter. After she died, he'd just maintained, kept things going, made sure the kids were fed and clothed and got to school on time. But he'd stopped really living, stopped trying new things, stopped believing the future could hold anything except more of the same quiet sadness. Watching the woman build her cabin piece by piece, he was remembering that life could be about building, not just maintaining. One Saturday they were working on the wall frames. The woman had gotten much better at the physical work. Her arms had visible muscle now. She could swing a hammer with confidence, but she was still learning, still making mistakes. No, you want to put that stud 16 inches from the last one, not 12, the neighbor said, checking her work with a measuring tape. She sighed. I keep getting that wrong. It's easy to mess up. Here, let me show you a trick. He pulled out a carpenter's pencil and showed her how to mark the measurements in a way that made it harder to confuse. His hand brushed hers while demonstrating, and they both felt it. A small spark of something neither was ready to name. She pulled back first. Got it, thanks. The kids were playing nearby, having finished their assigned tasks. The boy was building a fort out of scrap wood. The girl was reading a book in the shade, looking up occasionally to watch the work. Your kids are great, the woman said, hammering in a nail. They are. They've been through a lot. They seem happy. Happier lately, actually. I think having a project helps. Gives them something to focus on besides missing their mom. The woman paused her hammering. Do they talk about her? Sometimes. Less than they used to. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe it's just different. Grief changes shape, I think. Doesn't go away, just becomes something you carry differently. He looked at her, surprised. That's exactly what it feels like. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. She'd noticed he was more talkative lately. When he first started helping, he'd been quiet, just working efficiently and leaving. Now he stayed for lunch, told stories about his farm calls, laughed at her jokes. She'd noticed other things too, like how he always made sure she was wearing safety goggles before using power tools, how he'd started bringing extra coffee in the mornings because he'd learned she was always out by her second cup. Small things that meant he was paying attention, but she wasn't ready for anything. She'd left her marriage less than 6 months ago. Her heart was still healing, still learning to trust itself again. The last thing she needed was to jump into something new just because a kind man was being helpful. Still, she'd be lying if she said she didn't notice him. The way he was patient with his kids, how he treated animals with such gentleness when he made farm calls that passed her property, the sadness in his eyes that matched her own, 2 broken people, both trying to rebuild. It was a terrible foundation for anything romantic. She knew that. She was pretty sure he knew that too. By afternoon, they'd completed 2 full wall sections. Real progress. The cabin was starting to look like a cabin instead of just a skeleton of wood. Can we eat lunch here? The girl asked. I want to see inside the cabin. There's no inside yet, sweetie. It's just floor and walls, her father said, but we can pretend. The woman smiled. Actually, I made sandwiches. We can have a picnic inside the frame if you want. They sat on the plywood floor eating sandwiches and chips. The kids chattered about school. The boy had a new friend. The girl was annoyed about a group project. Normal kid stuff that felt extraordinary to the woman, who'd never had children and now wondered if she'd missed out. Do you want kids? The girl asked suddenly. In that way, kids ask invasive questions without realizing it. I don't know. The woman answered honestly. I never really decided. Life just went other directions. You'd be a good mom. You're patient. And you let us help even when we mess up. The woman's throat got tight. That's nice of you to say. The neighbor changed the subject, sensing her discomfort. But later, as they were cleaning up, he said quietly, Sorry about that. She doesn't have a filter sometimes. It's okay. She's sweet. She's been asking me if I'm going to date again. Kids want everything back to normal. What do you tell her? That there's no timeline for these things. That we're doing fine as we are. He paused. But honestly, I don't know what I want. I loved my wife. Still love her in a way. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and sometimes I don't know what to do with that. The woman nodded. I spent 10 years with someone who slowly convinced me I was boring and difficult and too much work. Even though I left him, his voice is still in my head sometimes, telling me I'm not enough, or that I'm too much. I don't trust my own judgment about people anymore. That's what he wanted, to make you doubt yourself. Well, it worked. She looked at her cabin, at the walls standing strong. That's why this matters so much. Every nail I hammer in is like proving him wrong, proving I can do hard things, that I'm capable. You are capable. This cabin proves it, she smiled. Some days I believe that. Other days I wake up and think I'm insane for even trying. Welcome to being human. We're all just pretending we know what we're doing. They laughed. And it felt good. Easy. Like they'd known each other much longer than a few months. As the family packed up to leave, the boy hugged the woman goodbye, just wrapped his arms around her waist and squeezed. She froze for a second, not expecting it, then hugged him back. See you next week, he said cheerfully. See you next week, she echoed. She watched them drive away, feeling something complicated in her chest. Not love, she wasn't ready for that. But connection, the beginning of caring about people, of letting herself be cared for in return. That night, she made a real dinner for once. Pasta with vegetables, eaten sitting in her camping chair, looking at her cabin in the fading light. The walls stood strong against the evening sky. Her walls, built with her own hands and the help of good people. She thought about the neighbor's question to his daughter about dating. The truth was, she didn't know if she'd ever want that again. Her marriage had broken something in her. Trust felt impossible. Opening up felt dangerous, but friendship? Friendship she could do. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be enough for now. Down the road, the neighbor was putting his kids to bed. His son fell asleep immediately, exhausted from running around all day. His daughter took longer, as always. Dad, do you think the cabin lady is lonely? He thought about that. Maybe. But I think she chose to be alone for a while, to figure things out. But she's not alone anymore. She has us. Yeah, she does. And we have her. That's good, right? He kissed his daughter's forehead. Yeah, baby. That's good. After she fell asleep, he went to his bedroom and looked at the photo on his nightstand. His wife laughing at something he'd said on their anniversary 5 years ago. Before the aneurysm, before everything changed, I met someone, he said to the photo, feeling only slightly ridiculous. Not like that. Just a friend, a neighbor. But the kids like her and she's good people, and I thought you should know. The photo didn't answer, but he felt lighter having said it out loud. The accident happened on a Wednesday afternoon. The woman had been working on installing the loft beams, the ones that would support a small sleeping area above the main room. She'd watched the videos a dozen times. She knew what she was doing, or thought she did. She was up on the ladder trying to position a heavy beam onto the brackets she'd installed. The beam was awkward, heavier on one end. She adjusted her grip, trying to push it into place when her foot slipped. It happened so fast. 1 second she was on the ladder, the next she was falling. She hit the ground hard, her ankle twisted underneath her. The pain was instant and blinding. She heard herself cry out, then bit down on it hard. She lay there for a moment, trying to catch her breath, trying to assess. Her ankle was screaming. When she tried to move it, the pain made her vision go black at the edges. Not good. This was not good. She was 2 miles from the main road. No cell service out here unless you climb to the high ridge. Her phone was in the truck, but even if she got to it, who would she call? She didn't know anyone's number. Everything was saved in her phone, which was useless without service. She tried to stand and immediately fell. Her ankle couldn't hold any weight at all. Panic started creeping in. She was alone. Really alone. And hurt. She looked at her truck, parked about 50 feet away. It might as well have been a mile. But the horn. She could reach the horn if she could just get there. She started crawling. Every movement sent jolts of pain through her ankle. Rocks dug into her palms. It was slow, exhausting work. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She wanted to cry but refused to let herself. It took her 20 minutes to reach the truck. She pulled herself up using the door handle, balancing on one foot, and leaned on the horn. 3 long blasts, pause, 3 more. The universal signal for distress. She kept it up, resting between rounds, hoping someone would hear. The valley was usually so quiet. Surely someone would notice. Down the road, the neighbor was in his barn, organizing medications for tomorrow's calls. His son was helping, carefully reading labels on bottles. "Dad, do you hear that?" He stopped, listened. A car horn. Persistent. Rhythmic. His stomach dropped. That was coming from the direction of the cabin. "Stay here," he told his son, already running for his truck. He drove faster than he should have on the dirt road. His mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. She was alone out there. If she was hurt, if something had happened, he pulled up to find her leaning against her truck, pale and shaking. One look at her ankle, already swelling badly, told him everything. What happened? Fell off the ladder. Ankle's bad. I can't put weight on it. He was already pulling out his phone, then remembered there was no service. "We need to get you to the clinic. Can you get in my truck?" She nodded. He helped her hop to his vehicle, taking most of her weight. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Once she was in the passenger seat, he drove as carefully as he could while still moving fast. Every bump made her wince. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know who else to call." "Well, I couldn't call anyone, but I hoped—" "Stop, this is exactly what neighbors are for. You did the right thing." At the clinic, the doctor confirmed what they'd feared. Badly sprained, possibly a small fracture. X-rays would tell them more. Either way, she was looking at 3 weeks minimum in a walking boot. No weight on it, 3 weeks. The woman felt tears finally coming. 3 weeks meant no work on the cabin. 3 weeks meant winter getting closer. 3 weeks meant losing all her momentum. "Hey," the neighbor said gently. "It's going to be okay. It's not. I'm behind schedule already. If I don't get the roof on before serious snow comes, everything I've done is worthless. The whole frame could get damaged. Then we'll get the roof on. You have your own life, your job, your kids. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. We'll figure it out." She wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. The pain medication they'd given her was making her fuzzy. The doctor came back with X-ray results. No fracture, thankfully, but a severe sprain. Walking boot for 3 weeks, then physical therapy. The neighbor drove her back to her property as the sun was setting. She stared at her cabin, at the loft beam still waiting to be installed, at all the work that still needed doing. "You can't stay in a tent with that ankle," he said. "Not happening. I'll be fine. You can't even walk. How are you going to cook? Use the bathroom?" This isn't about pride anymore. This is about being practical. She knew he was right. Hated it, but knew it. "What are you suggesting?" "Stay in our guest room." "Just until you can walk again." 3 weeks? That's too much to ask. Then good thing you're not asking. I'm telling you. You're staying with us. She was too tired and in too much pain to argue. He helped her pack some clothes and toiletries. She took one last look at her cabin, feeling like she was abandoning it, and let him drive her to his house. His kids were worried and excited in equal measure. The girl immediately wanted to help, bringing pillows and water. The boy showed her where the guest bathroom was and made sure she had towels. "Can she stay forever?" the boy asked his father. "Just until her ankle heals, buddy." "But what if she likes it here and doesn't want to leave?" The neighbor caught the woman's eye. She smiled despite everything. "Your dad might kick me out before that happens. I'm not a great house guest. Are you messy?" "Sometimes. Dad's messy too." "You'll fit right in." That first night was strange. She was in a real bed in a real house with a family. She could hear the kids getting ready for bed, hear the neighbor reminding them to brush their teeth. Ordinary sounds that reminded her of how isolated she'd been. She didn't sleep well. Partly the pain, partly the strangeness of being in someone else's home. Around midnight, she hobbled out on her crutches to get water and found the neighbor sitting at the kitchen table working on something. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Ankle hurts, you?" "Just catching up on paperwork." The glamorous life of a rural vet. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Want some company?" She sat. They were quiet for a while. The only sound his pen scratching and the ticking of the clock. I'm scared, she admitted suddenly. I've put everything into that cabin. All my money, all my energy. And now I can't even walk. What if I can't finish it? What if this was all a huge mistake? He put down his pen. You fell. That's not failure. That's an accident. Happens to professional builders too. But I'm not a professional. I'm just someone who thought she could do something she has no training for. You've already proven you can do it. The cabin is half built. The foundation is solid. The walls are straight. You did that. One sprained ankle doesn't erase all that work. But winter's coming, and we'll get the roof on before it does. I promise, she wanted to believe him. Why are you being so nice to me? We barely know each other. He thought about that. Honestly, because you remind me that it's possible to start over. After my wife died, I thought my life was just about raising my kids and getting through each day. But watching you build that cabin, fighting for something you believe in, it made me realize I've been just surviving, not living. You're brave, and I guess I want to remember how to be brave too. The vulnerability in his voice made her throat tight. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. That's what bravery is, being terrified and doing it anyway. They sat in the kitchen until almost 2 a.m. talking. Really talking. She told him about her marriage, how it had slowly eroded her confidence until she barely recognized herself, how leaving felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if she could fly. He told her about his wife's death, how sudden it was. One minute she was laughing at dinner, the next she was gone. How he'd tried to be strong for the kids but felt like he was drowning. How the last 3 years had been a blur of just keeping everyone afloat. The kids seem happy, she said. They are. Resilient in ways I can't understand. But I know they worry about me. They shouldn't have to worry about their parent. That's backwards. They love you. That's not worry. That's caring. Maybe I just want them to have a normal childhood, or as normal as possible without their mother. I think you're doing better than you realize, he smiled tiredly. Same to you. Eventually they both went to bed. She lay in the guest room listening to the house settle. This wasn't her cabin, but it felt safe, and maybe that was what she needed right now, a safe place to heal in more ways than one. The next morning she woke to the smell of breakfast cooking. She hobbled out to find the neighbor making pancakes while his kids set the table. Morning, Dad's making his famous pancakes, the boy announced. They're just regular pancakes, the neighbor said, but he looked pleased. They're the best pancakes, the girl insisted. Mom taught him the recipe. Something passed over the neighbor's face. Pain, but also something softer. She did. Secret ingredient is vanilla extract. She said it makes them special. They ate breakfast together and the woman felt a pang of longing for something she'd never had. This. A family table. Easy conversation. People who cared about each other. After breakfast, the neighbor helped her back to the guest room. I have farm calls today, but I'll be back this afternoon. The kids have school. Will you be okay alone? I'll be fine. I have books. I'll just rest. Call if you need anything. The landline works. After everyone left, the house was quiet. She hobbled around a bit, exploring. The first Saturday after the injury, the woman woke up to voices outside. She hobbled to the window on her crutches and saw the neighbor's truck loaded with wood and supplies. Parked at her cabin site, she made her way to the kitchen where the neighbor was making coffee. What's happening at the cabin? She asked. Roof day. Got some guys from town coming to help. We're going to get as much done as possible. I should be there. You will be. I'm driving you over after breakfast. You can supervise from a chair. She wanted to argue that she should be up there hammering nails, but she knew it was impossible. Her ankle was still swollen and painful. I can't pay people to help. Nobody asked for payment. Small towns work differently. You help when help is needed. That's just how it is. By 9 o'clock, 5 men had shown up. Ranchers and farmers, guys who knew their way around construction. They'd heard about the woman building a cabin alone, and they respected that. The injury wasn't her fault, and leaving her cabin unfinished going into winter would be cruel. The woman sat in a camping chair, her ankle elevated, watching them work. It should have felt like failure, having other people finish her project. But instead it felt like community, like belonging. The neighbor's kids were there too, running around, bringing tools when asked, mostly just playing. The boy had appointed himself water delivery boy, making sure everyone stayed hydrated. How's it looking? The woman asked the neighbor during a break. Good. We'll have the roof frame done today, maybe start on the actual roofing. Weather's supposed to hold all weekend. If we can get the roof on, you're safe for winter. She felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to thank you all. Build a good cabin. That's thanks enough. This valley needs more people who aren't afraid of hard work. By evening, the roof frame was complete. The men packed up, declining her repeated offers of payment. Just remember this when someone else needs help, one old rancher told her. That's how it works. After everyone left, she sat with the neighbor and his kids looking at the cabin. It had a roof frame now. It looked like a real building. It's beautiful, the girl said. It will be, the woman agreed, thanks to your dad and everyone else. But you built most of it. They just helped with the hard part. The woman smiled. Yeah, I guess I did build most of it. That night, back at the neighbor's house, the kids went to bed early, exhausted from the day. The woman and the neighbor sat on the porch watching stars appear. Your friends are good people, she said. They are. Most of them have lived here their whole lives. They've helped me through a lot. After your wife? He nodded. When she died, I didn't know how to do anything. I barely knew how to work the washing machine. These same guys showed up with casseroles and offered to teach me how to cook. Fixed things around my house I didn't even know were broken. Took the kids for afternoons when I was too sad to be a good father. That must have meant everything. It did. And now I get to pass it forward. Help someone else who needs it. They were quiet for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind that only happens between people who've moved past small talk. Can I ask you something? She said, sure. Do you ever get scared about moving on? Like, if you let yourself be happy again, you're betraying her memory? He took a deep breath. Every single day. Especially lately. He looked at her. Yeah, lately. The air between them shifted. They both felt it. That thing they'd been carefully not acknowledging. But neither was ready to name it. Not yet. I'm not ready for anything, she said quietly. I know, neither am I, but I'm glad I'm here. Glad I met you and your kids. We're glad too. The second weekend, more people showed up. Women this time. Bringing food and offering to help with the interior planning. One woman was an interior designer who gave free advice on layout. Another had extra windows from a renovation she was happy to donate. The woman was overwhelmed. Why is everyone being so nice? An older woman laughed. Honey, this is a small town. We take care of our own. You're one of us now, whether you plan to be or not. One of us. The woman had never been one of anything before. In the city, she'd been anonymous. In her marriage, she'd been isolated. But here, somehow, she'd stumbled into belonging. By the end of the weekend, the roof was fully on. The cabin was weatherproof. Inside, the loft beam that had caused her fall was finally in place, installed by guys who knew what they were doing. You did it, the neighbor said. Well, we did it. But it's your cabin. Your dream. She looked at the building, feeling a mix of pride and humility. It's different than I imagined. I thought I'd do everything alone. Prove I didn't need anyone. And what did you prove instead? That needing people isn't weakness. That accepting help is its own kind of strength. She looked at him. You taught me that. You taught me something too. What's that? That life doesn't end when someone dies. It changes and it hurts, but it doesn't end. You can still build new things, dream new dreams. His kids ran up, interrupting the moment. The boy wanted to explore inside the cabin now that it had a roof. The girl wanted to know when the woman would move in. Not for a while yet, the woman said. Still needs windows, insulation, a lot of interior work. But it's getting there. Can we help with that too? The boy asked, if you want to. If your dad says it's okay. It's okay, the neighbor said. We've come this far. Might as well see it through. That week, the woman started putting weight on her ankle again. It was still tender but healing. She could walk short distances without crutches. The doctor said she was recovering well. Living with the neighbor and his kids had become almost normal. She'd learned their routines, knew that the boy didn't like his toast too dark, that the girl read for 30 minutes before bed every night, that the neighbor always had 2 cups of coffee before he was really awake. She'd also learned that the girl sometimes had nightmares about her mom, that the boy was afraid of thunderstorms because his mom had died during one, that the neighbor kept his late wife's favorite coffee mug on a shelf but never used it. One night she heard crying from the girl's room. The neighbor was out on an emergency farm call. She hesitated, not sure if it was her place to intrude, but the crying continued and she couldn't just ignore it. She knocked softly. Hey, can I come in? The girl was sitting up in bed, tears on her face. I had a bad dream. Want to talk about it? I dreamed Mom came back, but she didn't recognize us. She looked at me and Dad and my brother like we were strangers. The woman sat on the edge of the bed. That sounds really scary. Do you think people in heaven remember us? The woman chose her words carefully. I think if someone loved you as much as your mom loved you, they remember you everywhere. In heaven, in your dreams, in every good memory you have. Love doesn't forget. But what if I forget her? I can't remember her voice anymore. Not really. Your dad has videos, right? You can watch those when you miss her voice. And forgetting small things doesn't mean you're forgetting her. The important stuff, the love stuff, that stays forever. The girl was quiet, thinking, do you think it's okay that I like you? Of course it is. But what if Dad likes you too? Does that mean he doesn't love Mom anymore? The woman's heart squeezed. Your dad will always love your mom. She's your mom. But hearts are big. They can hold more than one person. Loving someone new doesn't erase the love for someone else. It's just different love. Both real, both important. Have you ever loved someone who died? No, but I loved someone who hurt me. And I had to learn that even though that love was real, I was allowed to hope for different love someday. Better love. It took me a long time to believe that. The girl hugged her suddenly, fiercely. The woman hugged her back, feeling tears in her own eyes. When the neighbor came home an hour later, the girl was asleep and the woman was in the kitchen making tea. Everything okay? He asked. She had a nightmare. We talked. She's asleep now. He looked toward his daughter's room, then back at her. Thank you. For being here. For knowing what to say. I didn't really know what to say. I just tried to be honest. That's exactly what she needed. He paused. What we all need, actually, honesty. She met his eyes. They stood in the kitchen, both aware they were having a conversation beneath the conversation. I'm scared, she said. Me too. I don't want to mess this up. Whatever this is, neither do I, so what do we do? He smiled slightly. Keep building, I guess. Take it slow, be honest. See what happens, she nodded. I can do that. 1 more week and you'll be off the walking boot. Then you can really get back to the cabin. Yeah. The cabin. She looked around his kitchen at the evidence of family life everywhere. It's going to be quiet living alone after this. You don't have to be alone. You can be alone in your cabin but still come over for dinner, still help with homework, still be part of things. Is that what you want?
Yeah, he said softly.
That's what I want. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even really a beginning of romance. But it was something. An acknowledgement that they mattered to each other. That whatever was growing between them was worth nurturing carefully. The woman went to bed that night thinking about foundations. How she'd spent months building a foundation for her cabin, making sure it was strong enough to hold everything else. Maybe relationships were the same way. You had to build slowly, carefully, making sure the foundation was solid before you added more weight. November arrived with cold mornings and the first real threat of snow. The woman was back to working on her cabin, ankle fully healed, though she tired more easily than before the injury. The roof was on, but there was still so much to do. Windows to install, insulation to add, interior walls to finish. She'd moved back to her tent, insisting she'd imposed on the neighbor and his kids long enough. But she came over for dinner most nights. It had become routine, expected. The kids would ask what she was making at the cabin that day. She'd help with homework while the neighbor cooked. They'd eat together, talk about their days, clean up as a team. It felt like family, but nobody said that word out loud. It felt too big, too scary, too soon. One Friday evening, the neighbor was at the stove making spaghetti when he said, "Snow's coming tomorrow. Big storm. You should probably stay here this weekend. I'll be fine in my tent. Your tent that nearly blew away in the last storm." She smiled. I reinforced it. Still, the cabin isn't heated yet. You'd be miserable trying to work in that cold. His daughter looked up from her math homework. "Please stay. We can make cookies tomorrow. I found Mom's recipe book." The woman saw the neighbor's face tighten slightly at the mention of his late wife, then soften. He was getting better at hearing about her without visible pain. Progress measured in tiny moments. "Cookies do sound good," the woman said, "so you'll stay?" "I'll stay." The snow started falling Saturday morning, big fat flakes that the kids pressed their faces against the window to watch. The woman found herself in the kitchen with the girl, flour everywhere, mixing dough from a recipe card written in neat handwriting. Mom had really pretty handwriting, the girl said. Tracing the words with one finger, she did. You can tell she took her time, made it special. She made everything special. Even regular days. The girl looked up. Do you think that's possible? To make regular days special after someone dies? The woman thought about her months in the tent, watching sunrises, building something with her own hands. Yeah, I think it is. But it's different. The special comes from different things. Like what? Like right now. Making cookies with you. That's pretty special. The girl smiled. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, rolling dough and cutting shapes. The boy wandered in and stole raw dough until his father told him he'd get sick. Can I help? The boy asked. Sure. You can do the sprinkles. The neighbor leaned against the counter, watching them. The woman caught his eye and saw something there. Gratitude, maybe. Or something more complicated. Something that made her heart beat a little faster. Later, while the cookies baked, the kids settled in front of a movie. The neighbor and the woman ended up on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall. Thank you, he said. For what? For being so good with them. For not trying to replace their mom, but not being afraid to be here either. That balance is hard. They're easy to be good with. They're great kids. They love you, you know. They don't say it, but I can tell. Her throat got tight. I love them too. They were quiet for a moment. Then he said, I need to tell you something. Her stomach flipped. Okay, I'm attracted to you. More than attracted. I think about you constantly. When you're at the cabin, I worry about you. When you're here, I don't want you to leave. And it scares me because I didn't think I could feel this way again. She couldn't breathe. I feel it too. And it terrifies me. Why? Because my ex-husband made me believe I was too difficult to love. That I asked for too much, cared too much, felt too much. And even though I know that was his problem, not mine, I'm still afraid. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not ready? What if we hurt your kids? He reached for her hand. What if we don't mess it up? What if we take it slow and careful and honest? What if we're both ready, just scared? But your wife would want me to be happy. I know that. She told me actually right before she died. Not because she knew she was dying, but just randomly one night. She said if anything ever happened to her, she wanted me to find someone else. She said I was too good at loving to stop doing it. Tears ran down the woman's face. She sounds amazing. She was. And she'll always be part of my life because she's the mother of my children. But that doesn't mean there's no room for anyone else. Hearts expand. They don't replace. I don't know how to do this. How to date someone with kids. How to be part of a family. Neither do I. I've never dated as a widower. Never introduced anyone to my kids in that way. We'll figure it out together. She looked at him. Really looked at him. At this man who'd saved her during a storm. Who'd helped build her cabin, who'd taken her in when she was hurt. Who'd shown her what kindness looked like, what community meant, what it felt like to matter to people. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Slow and careful and honest, like you said, but let's try. He kissed her then, gentle and tentative, like they were both made of something fragile. The snow fell around them, and inside his house his children laughed at something in their movie, and the world felt full of possibility. They didn't tell the kids right away. They wanted to be sure, to know this was real before involving them. So they kept their relationship quiet, secret smiles across the dinner table, hands touching when the kids weren't looking, long conversations after everyone was asleep, but kids notice everything. One morning the girl said to her father, "Are you dating the cabin lady?" He nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more now, and you look at her the way you used to look at Mom." His heart stopped. "Does that bother you?" The girl thought about it seriously. "No, I think Mom would like her. And you deserve to be happy, Dad. You've been sad for a really long time." He hugged his daughter, tears in his eyes. "I love you, you know that?" "I know. So can we have her over for Thanksgiving? For real, like as your girlfriend? Would that be okay with you?" "Yeah, can I call her and ask?" "Let me talk to her first." That night after the kids were in bed, he told the woman about the conversation. She'd been expecting fear, resistance, jealousy, not acceptance. "They're really okay with this?" she asked. "More than okay. They're happy about it. But what if it doesn't work out? What if we try and fail and they get hurt? What if we try and succeed? What if we build something real? You can't avoid risk by avoiding love." She knew he was right. She'd spent her whole life avoiding risk, playing it safe, and it had led to a marriage that nearly broke her. Maybe it was time to be brave, to risk getting hurt for the chance at something real. "Okay," she said. "Thanksgiving. As your girlfriend, officially." He kissed her, and this time it was less tentative, more sure, like they'd crossed some invisible line and weren't going back. The next few weeks were a blur of cabin work and growing closer. She installed windows with help from the neighbor. They added insulation together, his kids handing them materials and asking endless questions. The boy wanted to know if she'd teach him to build things. The girl wanted to know if she could decorate the cabin. "It's your cabin," the woman said. "You can help make it beautiful. Can I paint a wall? Just one wall, whatever color I want?" The woman looked at the neighbor, who shrugged. "It's your cabin. Your rules. Pick a color," the woman said. "We'll paint it together." The girl chose purple. Deep, rich purple that reminded her of twilight. They spent a Saturday afternoon painting one wall of the cabin that color, while the boy and his father worked on installing the wood stove. "This is the best day," the girl said. "Paint splattered on her clothes and in her hair, yeah?" the woman asked. "Yeah, it feels like we're a team, like we're building something together." "We are building something together. Not just the cabin, right?" The woman set down her brush. "No, not just the cabin. Good, because I really like you being around. It feels right." That night, sitting around the table in the neighbor's house, the woman felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. Like all the pieces of her life had finally clicked into place. She had her cabin, nearly finished now. She had work that satisfied her soul. She had friends in town who waved when they saw her. She had these kids who'd somehow become hers without anyone officially saying so, and she had this man who looked at her like she was worth loving. "What are you thinking about?" the neighbor asked, catching her staring into space. "Just that I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy." "Me too," he said quietly. The kids were already talking about Christmas. What decorations they'd make. Whether they'd get a real tree or fake. The boy wanted to know if the cabin would be finished enough to have Christmas there. "Maybe," the woman said. "If we work hard." "We'll work hard," the boy promised. "We're a good team," and they were. Through November and into December, they worked on the cabin together. The woman did most of the detail work, but the neighbor helped with electrical and plumbing. The kids painted and organized and made the space feel lived in even before it was fully finished. One evening, the woman stood in her nearly complete cabin looking around. Wood walls, purple accent wall, windows that let in the last light of day, a loft above, a wood stove radiating heat, simple furniture she'd built herself or bought secondhand. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. The neighbor came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What do you think?" "I think I built a cabin." "You did. All by yourself, not all by myself. I had help. Really important help." December brought real cold to the valley, the kind that made your breath visible and turned the world white. The cabin was nearly finished now. The woman had moved in properly, though she still spent most evenings at the neighbor's house. It was easier that way. Warmer, for one thing, while her wood stove learned to heat efficiently. And she liked being there, liked the noise and chaos of family life. Christmas was coming fast, and the kids were buzzing with excitement. One evening, the girl asked the question the woman had been dreading. "Will you spend Christmas with us?" The woman looked at the neighbor, uncertain. Christmas was a family holiday. Their family holiday. She didn't want to intrude on memories, on traditions built with someone who was gone. "I don't want to be in the way," she said carefully. "You're not in the way," the boy said immediately. "You're part of our family now." The neighbor's eyes met hers across the table. "He's right. If you want to be here, we want you here. But your wife, don't you have special traditions? Things you do to remember her?" "We do," the girl said. "We make her favorite cookies. We look at photo albums. We tell stories about her. But that doesn't mean we can't have new traditions, too." "That's what Dad said, right, Dad?" The neighbor nodded. "Life doesn't stop. We honor her memory, but we also keep living. She'd want that. She'd want us to be happy." The woman felt tears threatening. "I'd be honored to spend Christmas with you all." "Thank you," the kids cheered. Plans immediately began forming. What they'd cook, what movies they'd watch, what decorations they'd make. The woman was swept up in their enthusiasm, feeling both welcomed and terrified. That night, after the kids went to bed, she and the neighbor sat on the porch despite the cold. It had become their thing, these late-night conversations under the stars. "Are you sure about Christmas?" she asked. Really sure? I don't want your kids to feel like I'm replacing their mother. They don't think that. Kids are more adaptable than we give them credit for. They understand that loving you doesn't mean forgetting her. But what about you? How do you feel? He was quiet for a long moment. Guilty sometimes. Like I'm betraying her by being happy with someone else. But then I remember what she said about wanting me to find love again. And I think about how she lived. She grabbed life with both hands. She'd hate seeing me frozen in grief for years. She'd probably be mad it took me this long to move forward. The woman smiled through tears. She sounds like she was something. She was. And so are you. Different but equally amazing. I'm lucky to have loved two incredible women. Loved? He turned to her. Love, present tense. I love you. I probably have for a while, but I was too scared to say it. Her heart hammered. I love you too. And your kids. And this life we're building together. Even though it's complicated and messy and sometimes scary. Especially because of that. Nothing worth having is simple. They kissed under the winter stars, and it felt like a promise. Not just to each other, but to themselves. To choose love even when it was scary. To build new things while honoring old memories. To be brave enough to risk heartbreak for the chance at happiness. The week before Christmas, the woman helped the kids make decorations. They strung popcorn and cranberries, made paper snowflakes, painted pine cones. The girl talked constantly about her mother, sharing memories the woman had never heard. Mom loved Christmas. She'd start playing Christmas music in November and Dad would pretend to be annoyed, but he really wasn't. She sounds like she knew how to celebrate. She did. She made everything magical. Even when my brother was a baby and cried all the time, she still made it special. The boy was quieter, his memories fuzzier. He'd been only 4 when his mother died. I mostly remember feelings, he said. Like I remember being happy. I remember her hugs, but I don't remember her face unless I look at pictures. That's okay, the woman said gently. Feelings are important memories too. Do you have a mom? The boy asked. I do, but we're not close. She didn't really understand when I left my marriage and moved out here. Thought I was running away, were you? Maybe at first. But I was also running toward something. Toward myself, I guess. Toward the person I was supposed to be. The girl looked up from her decorating. I'm glad you ran here. 2 Hour Valley. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and the smell of cookies baking. The neighbor's house was warm and bright, lights twinkling, kids running around with more energy than should be possible. The woman helped with dinner, her hands working alongside the neighbors in the kitchen in a dance they'd learned over months of cooking together. After dinner, they sat around the tree. The neighbor pulled out photo albums and they spent an hour looking at pictures of his late wife. The kids told stories. The woman asked questions, genuinely wanting to know about this person who'd been so important to the people she now loved. She was beautiful, the woman said, looking at a photo of the late wife laughing, her face full of joy. She was, the neighbor agreed, inside and out. I wish I could have met her. I think you two would have been friends. She collected people, made everyone feel special, kind of like you do. The woman's throat tightened. Being compared to his late wife felt like the highest compliment and also terrifying. Those were big shoes to fill. Later, the girl pulled out an ornament, handmade and slightly lopsided. Mom made this when I was little. See, it's supposed to be our family, 4 people holding hands. The woman looked at the 4 figures on the ornament, perfect in their imperfection. Should we make a new one? The boy asked suddenly. With 5 people? The room went silent. The woman held her breath. The neighbor spoke carefully. Would that feel okay? Or would it feel like we're forgetting Mom? The girl thought about it seriously. I don't think it's forgetting. It's just showing that our family grew. We added someone. The old ornament can stay up too to remember, but we can have a new one that shows now. I think that's beautiful, the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. But only if everyone's comfortable with it. Let's do it, the boy said. All of us together. That way it's really ours. They spent the next hour making a new ornament. 5 people holding hands this time. The work was messy and imperfect and perfect all at once. When they finished, they hung it on the tree next to the original 4-person ornament. There, the girl said, satisfied. Both families. The one we were and the one we are now. The neighbor pulled his kids close, then reached for the woman's hand. They stood together looking at the tree, at the 2 ornaments side by side, telling the story of a family that had survived loss and learned to love again. That night, after the kids finally crashed from their sugar and excitement high, The woman and the neighbor sat by the tree alone. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For handling all of this so perfectly. For not being threatened by her memory. For loving my kids like they're yours. For being you. I don't know if I handled it perfectly. I'm terrified most of the time. Being terrified and doing it anyway, that's courage." She leaned against him. "Do you really think she would have liked me?" "I know she would have." She had a saying, one of many. She said the heart isn't a pie. Loving more people doesn't mean having less love for each one. It means having more love overall. She believed that completely. She was wise. She was, and she was right. I love her. I love you. I love my kids. All different loves, all real, all important. None of them diminish each other. The woman looked at the tree, at the lights reflecting off the ornaments. Two ornaments, two versions of family, both honored, both real. "I never imagined this," she said. "When I came here to build my cabin, I thought I was done with family. Done with letting people in. I was going to be independent and self-sufficient and prove I didn't need anyone. And now? Now I know that independence isn't about not needing people. It's about choosing to need them. Choosing to let them matter. I'm still independent. I built my cabin. I proved I could. But I also learned that having people who care about you isn't weakness. It's everything." He kissed the top of her head. "You've taught me something too. That life keeps going. That honoring the past doesn't mean living in it. That it's possible to hold joy and grief in the same heart at the same time." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the house settle, the wind outside, the gentle hum of life continuing. Christmas morning was chaos in the best way. The kids tore through presents with enthusiasm. The woman had made handmade gifts, little things she'd carved from scrap wood from the cabin. A small box for the girl, a toy truck for the boy. They treasured them like they were made of gold. The neighbor gave her a gift that made her cry. A hand-carved sign for her cabin that said home. Simple, but it said everything. "You built a home," he said. "Not just a cabin. A real home. And you're home for us too." She kissed him, not caring that the kids were watching and making exaggerated, grossed-out sounds. They spent the day in pajamas, eating too much, playing games, watching movies. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. The woman kept finding herself stopping, just taking it in. This feeling of belonging, of being part of something, of having a place and people and purpose. Late that night, after everyone else was asleep, she walked back to her cabin. Her finished cabin. Lights on inside, smoke rising from the chimney. Spring came slowly to the valley, melting snow revealing green underneath. The woman's cabin had survived its first winter perfectly. The roof held. The walls stayed straight. The wood stove kept her warm through the coldest nights. Everything she'd built with her own hands had proven strong. But she hadn't spent many nights there alone. Most evenings, she ended up at the neighbor's house. Most mornings, she woke to the sound of his kids getting ready for school. The lines between her life and theirs had blurred until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. One Saturday morning in April, she was making breakfast in the neighbor's kitchen when the boy wandered in, still in his pajamas. "When are you going to move in?" he asked, like it was the most natural question in the world. She nearly dropped the spatula. "What? Move in? You're here all the time anyway. Your cabin is nice, but it's small and lonely. You should just live here with us." The neighbor walked in, catching the end of the conversation. His eyes met hers, and she saw her own panic reflected there. "Buddy, that's not really how it works," he said carefully. "Why not? You love her, right?" "Yes. And she loves you and us, right?" The woman nodded, unable to speak. "So why wouldn't we all live together? That's what families do." The girl appeared in the doorway. "Are we talking about this finally?" "I've been wondering when someone would bring it up." The neighbor sat down heavily. "You guys have been thinking about this?" "For months," the girl said. "It's obvious. She's part of our family. She should live here. Unless—" She looked worried suddenly. "Unless you don't want to?" The woman's heart was pounding. She looked at the neighbor, at his kids, at this life she'd somehow fallen into. 6 months ago, she'd been alone in a tent, determined to prove she didn't need anyone. Now here she was, being asked to join a family. "Can your dad and I talk about this?" she managed to say. "Okay, but don't take forever," the boy said. "I already cleaned out half my toy box to make room in the closet for your stuff." After the kids went to watch TV, the woman and the neighbor stood in the kitchen, both slightly stunned. I had no idea they were thinking about that, he said. Me neither. What do you think? She took a deep breath. I think I'm terrified. I've never lived with anyone except my ex-husband, and that ended badly. What if I'm not good at this? What if I mess it up? What if you don't? What if this is exactly where you're supposed to be? But it's so fast. We've only been officially together for 4 months. We've known each other for almost a year. We've spent nearly every day together. My kids already love you. I love you. What are we waiting for? Permission from some invisible timeline? She laughed nervously. When you put it that way, look, I'm scared too. I haven't lived with anyone since my wife. This house is full of her memory. But it's also full of life now. Because of you. You've made it a home again, not just a place we exist. I don't want to erase her. You couldn't if you tried. She's the mother of my children. She'll always be part of this house. But there's room for you too. There's room for both histories. The woman walked to the window, looking out at her cabin in the distance. Her accomplishment. Her proof that she could survive alone. I love my cabin, she said quietly. I know. But I love being here more. I love the noise and the chaos and waking up to your kids arguing about breakfast. I love feeling like I'm part of something bigger than myself. He came to stand beside her. So what do you think? Want to make this official? Move in? Be a family? She turned to him, tears in her eyes. Yes, but can we do it slowly? Can I keep my cabin at least for a while? As a backup, just in case? Just in case what? In case I mess this up. In case you all wake up one day and realize I'm too much or not enough or whatever my ex-husband always said about me. He took her face in his hands. Listen to me. You are not too much. You are not enough. You are exactly right. For me, for my kids, for this life. That voice in your head, that's not the truth. That's fear talking. And I get it. But you have to stop letting fear make your decisions. I'm trying. I know. And I'll keep reminding you until you believe it. He kissed her gently. Keep your cabin if it makes you feel safe. But know that you're safe here too. We're not going anywhere. They told the kids that evening. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. The boy wanted to help move her stuff right away. The girl started planning how to rearrange the house to make room. The neighbor had to calm them down, explain that this would take time, that they needed to do it right. But she's saying yes? The boy asked. I'm saying yes, the woman confirmed. The celebration that followed was loud and joyful and slightly overwhelming. The woman found herself laughing and crying at the same time, unable to believe this was her life now. Over the next few weeks, she slowly moved her things from the cabin. Not everything, just enough to make the neighbor's house feel like hers too. Clothes in the closet, books on the shelves, her coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet. It felt strange at first. She'd wake up disoriented, forgetting where she was, but slowly it started feeling normal. Right, like she'd always belonged there. She kept her cabin, though. Some weekends she'd go there alone for a few hours, just to sit in the quiet and remember what she'd accomplished. The neighbor understood. His kids understood. It wasn't about running away. It was about having a piece of herself, a reminder of her own strength. One evening in May, they had a dinner to celebrate. The woman had officially lived with them for a month. It wasn't a formal occasion, just family dinner, but it felt significant somehow. Can we play the question game? The girl asked. It was something the neighbor's late wife had started. Everyone took turns asking a question, and everyone had to answer honestly. What's your question? The neighbor asked his daughter. What makes you feel like you're home? The boy went first. When Dad makes pancakes on Sunday morning. The girl said, when we're all watching movies together and arguing about what to watch. The neighbor looked at the woman. When I hear someone else in the house, after years of it being just us, having someone else here, someone I love, that's when I feel home. They all looked at the woman. She took a breath. This, right now, sitting around this table with people who know me, really know me and choose me anyway. That's home. Not a building or a place, you, all of you. The kids beamed. The neighbor reached for her hand under the table. My turn for a question, the boy said. Can we call you Mom? The room went silent. The woman's heart stopped. Buddy, that's a big question, the neighbor said carefully, but she kind of is, right? She lives here. She makes us breakfast. She helps with homework. She tucks me in. That's mom stuff. The girl was quieter. I don't want to forget our real mom. You won't, the woman said immediately. She'll always be your mom. Your first mom. Nothing changes that. But you could be our second mom? The boy asked hopefully. The woman looked at the neighbor. He had tears in his eyes. If that's what feels right to you, the woman said carefully. I would be honored. But I don't need a title. I just need to be part of your lives. I want to call you Mom, the boy said firmly. The girl was thinking. Can I call you by your name sometimes and Mom sometimes? Depending on how I feel? Of course. Okay, then yeah. You can be our second mom. The woman couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. The neighbor was crying too. They were all crying actually, even the boy who usually hated crying. Group hug, the boys shouted, and they all piled together, laughing and crying and holding each other tight. Later that night, the woman and the neighbor sat on the porch, their usual spot for big conversations. I never thought I'd have this, she said. A family, kids, someone who loves me without trying to change me. I never thought I'd love again. Genuinely love, not just going through motions. But here we are. Here we are. They sat in comfortable silence. A year ago, they'd been strangers. Now they were family. Life was strange like that, full of unexpected turns and second chances. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me that day in the storm. For helping with my cabin. For not letting me stay isolated. For loving me even when I was too scared to love back. Thank you for building that cabin. For being brave enough to start over. For teaching my kids that it's possible to survive hard things. For reminding me what living looks like. Down the road, her cabin stood in the moonlight. Empty now, mostly, but still important. Still proof of what she could do when she put her mind to it. Still a reminder that she'd saved herself before anyone else could. But here, in this house full of noise and love and life, that was where she belonged. Not because she needed saving, but because she'd chosen to let people in. Chosen connection over isolation. Chosen to believe she was worth loving. The boy had cleaned out his toy box. The girl had made space in her closet. The neighbor had added her name to the emergency contact list at the kids' school. Small things that added up to family. A year ago, she'd driven into this valley with a truck full of tools and a heart full of determination to prove she could survive alone. She'd built her cabin log by log, and in the process, she'd built something else. A life, a family, a future she hadn't known she wanted. The neighbor had been watching from a distance, a widower who'd forgotten how to want anything beyond surviving each day. But watching her build her cabin, he'd remembered. Remembered that life was for living.